Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Reading, Writing, and Wikis. My name is Stephanie Sandifer. I'm an educator from Houston, Texas, and I've got some of the housekeeping information already up on the slide. The hashtag for this session is Reading or RW Wikis. The session materials, everything that I'm going to talk about is in a wiki, appropriately enough. And it's located, there's a bit.ly URL at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to flip to another slide in just a second so it's bigger so you can see it. But it's bit.ly / RW Wikis. So matches the hashtag, making it easy to remember. I also have up there my Twitter handle and my blog URL. I will, in addition to being an educator, I've also written a book called Wikis for School Leaders. Now, the purpose of this book, and I'll explain a little bit about why the purpose of this book is focused on professional use of wikis as opposed to using them in the classroom. I'll explain that later in this session. But I have an excerpt from this book that I'm giving away free if you subscribe to my blog through email. So if you go to my blog, you'll find that. Another thing, and I'm going to hop out of I'm going to go to the next slide so you can see the URL for the session materials and the hashtag. I'm going to give you a second to write that down or get to it on your device because I want to go to the wiki real quick because I've got 3 copies of my book that I'm going to give away at the end of the session along with 4 Connected Educator Month t-shirts that I agreed to give out at the end of the session, and I figured the easiest way to do that would be to get you, let's see, let me get out of this. So let's go to the wiki, and give me just a second. I'm looking at my screen down there on the floor, so there we go. Okay, so on the wiki, here's how you can win a book or a t-shirt. If you go to the wiki on your device, or your computer, or your phone, whatever you've got, you go to Pages and Files over here on the right-hand side. Do you see where I'm pointing? And click here. Click the plus sign. Create a page name. Could be your name. Make it easy. And then hit Create. And if you take your notes on that page on the wiki so that you can practice using a wiki while you're in here, I will randomly select people from that for the stuff at the end. So let me go back to the slideshow. Here. There we go. So all of the slides and a ton of information related to the things I'm going to talk about are all on the wiki. And I know there's a lot of great sessions at all of the time slots at this conference. So just to let you know, just to clarify what we're going to talk about in here, I'm going to talk about a little bit of the research around writing. I'm not going to go into depth on it, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the research on effective writing instruction and how wikis support that. I'm going to show you as many examples as I can and hoping that the Wi-Fi holds up. It's been kind of spotty, but hoping it holds up enough so that I can show you some of the examples that I've pulled of teachers that are using them in the classroom for student use. So students are writing and reading wikis and doing their work through the wiki. So I've got some examples of that to show you. I'll talk about some of the basics of how to get started with wikis, some of the lessons learned from those of us that have used wikis in the classroom with students. And we'll try to get all of that into 1 hour. So wish me luck. But again, everything's on the wiki, so anything we can't get to, it's all there. So let me go to the next slide here. Okay, so this really interesting project that I've been working on for the past 15 months is a new middle school in Houston that's going to open in August. And it's called A+ Unlimited Potential. So that's the logo. It's going to be located in the museum district in Houston. It's not going to have a campus. It's going to use the campuses of all the museums in the museum district. And the students are going to be completely mobile. So they're going to have a device. There's no decision yet on which device that's being decided, but some sort of device, or it's probably an iPad or Chromebook. But everything's all of their work has to be done electronically. And then they will be learning from the resources in the museums and using online resources like open educational resources, OER, and everything and anything else that we can get our hands on, that the learning coaches can get their hands on. And my role for the past 15 months, I've been involved on the design team, focusing on that whole learning model approach. And in the process, I have been giving recommendations on some of the resources we would use online. One of the very first tools that I recommended for the toolkit, for the learning coaches and the students, is a wiki. And for the simple reason that it's what I consider an open-ended tool, meaning it can be used for almost anything you want it to be used for. It's malleable. It's almost like Play-Doh, right? It's adaptable and flexible. And whatever you're trying to do, you can embed things into wikis. I ran into a challenge on this design team in the process of trying to decide or describe some of the tools we would be using, like wikis and Google Docs and things like that, because some of the board members initially were wondering, so are we going to be buying like packaged, like some kind of reading program or some kind of math program? And it took a lot of work to get them to understand that, or to get them out of a mindset of online tools and resources, meaning a packaged curriculum that we buy and use. And instead, we use open-ended tools that allow us to do almost anything we want across the curriculum. And at the same point in time, one of the points of this whole session this afternoon is that open-ended tools that allow students to practice and develop the skills that they will need when they get out of school. In other words, I'm trying to get people to focus on not the what, not what tools and resources, but the why and the how. What is it we want students to be able to do? How would we like for them to learn how to do that? And then let's figure out the tools and resources that best meet that need. And open-ended tools, like wikis, are one of those. Now, the title of this session is Reading, Writing, and Wikis, right? And reading and writing is an age-old concern in education. From the very beginning, we've been concerned about student literacy, students being able to communicate clearly and effectively for any purpose. And there are any number of, just Google 21st century skills. Just Google it. And you're going to get pages and pages and pages of results of organizations and institutions that have their own list. If you look at all of the lists, they're all pretty much the same. And a big chunk of that is just using different terminologies, but a big chunk of that is the ability to read, write, speak, listen, and think effectively. Now, this is probably the first time I've done this session since I've had an opportunity to get my hands on some recent research. Not related specifically to reading and writing, but I guess it's the summer 2012 issue of ISTE's Journal of Research on Technology and Education. There were 3 studies published in this issue that supported the use of wikis for student learning. And it was really interesting as I read through those studies. So essentially, what they found out was that wiki engagement using a wiki resulted in success on final exams in the courses that the students were taking. It also resulted in retention of course content and information as demonstrated in a multitude of other ways. And really critical bit of information they found out in some of these studies was that repeated use over time resulted in higher academic success. And then even one of the studies even stated clearly that there was a distinct difference between students in the class who did not engage with the wikis and students who did engage with the wikis. And as I go into some of the information on what kind of skills are developed with wikis, I think you'll be able to see the connections, like why these studies showed this. Because there are certain skills that are developed when you use a wiki that directly correlate with academic and professional success. But going back to that whole reading and writing thing, so there's a lot of research on what is effective reading and writing. And one of my roles as an educator over the past decade plus, for a while I was involved in the literacy initiative in Houston Independent School District. I worked as a literacy coach, and then I ended up becoming a literacy content specialist where I coached the literacy coaches. And we relied on a lot of this research to try to implement a program where we focused on literacy across the curriculum. That's a challenge. But one of those pieces of research that we looked at, there were actually two, Writing Next and Reading Next. And these were reports that were done for the Carnegie Corporation. And what they looked at was looking at years of research on what works in writing and reading education. And they came up with the elements of effective writing instruction. And then Reading Next, of course, is the elements of reading instruction. For this session, we're only going to focus on the writing. But you can look at the information in the Reading Next as well. In the handouts on the Wiki, you can get links to download these. These publications are free, and it's a PDF, so you can download it and look at it. But there's 11 total elements of effective writing instruction, and I'm fixing to flip through a whole bunch of slides, but I swear to you I will not spend too much time on them because I'm going to show you, I think it's about 9 of those elements match up with the work that you do on a wiki, or that can be done on a wiki. Let me clarify that. Work that can be done on a wiki. So let me go through these very quickly. Here are some of the elements. Writing strategies, specific writing strategies like pre-writing, editing, revising, things like that. Summarization of text, summarization of content. It doesn't have to be a text, and I think in one of the examples I'm going to show you, it's from a film club, a student film club, and they are summarizing films that they've created. Collaborative writing, obviously, that's what we all hear about wikis, right? Everybody can contribute, can collaborate on specific product goals. And what they meant by this is that you are very, very specific about what you want the students to write about or construct knowledge around. Word processing? Yeah, okay. Obviously, but although I should say that a lot of us in here, because we're at a tech conference, are kind of like, yeah, duh. But if you go to any school, there's still a lot of writing done by hand. And there are a number of reasons for that. But this is one of the elements. Inquiry activities. So making sure that students are writing about inquiry experiences that they are having, that they are not just regurgitating information from a book, that instead they are composing written information around something they have done and something they have learned through that inquiry process. Process writing, so this is where you're talking about specific processes for writing, think like 6+ traits, things like that. And then for content learning, this is one thing I'm going to focus a little bit on in this session because this is so critical. And when I worked as a literacy coach, and as a coach of a literacy coach, one of the biggest challenges we faced was getting past the hurdle of teachers saying, I am not a writing teacher. I am not an I don't teach ELA classes. I'm not a reading teacher. I teach math. I teach science. I teach social studies. I teach art. And as a matter of fact, my career started as an art teacher. So at the same point in time that I understood where they were coming from, on the other hand, as someone who was not an ELA teacher, I tried to push back on that a little bit, and say, but in your subject area, you still do a lot of reading and writing. Hopefully, you do a lot of reading and writing. So you need to have a process for helping students learn how to do that within your content area. And there's different types of writing that occurs in different content areas, and it's really essential that we learn that. In addition to those elements of effective writing instruction, questions that come up to me all of the time with what I see in classrooms are how often are we modeling and providing real-world examples of different types of writing for students and not just showing them academic examples, meaning fake examples of writing. How often are we making their writing activities authentic and meaningful? How often is it relevant to their world and to their life? And then going back to what I was just talking about a second ago, how often are we teaching writing anywhere outside of language arts? How often are we doing it across the content areas? And that's an image of a great writing activity that we see in ELA classes all the time. Readers and Writers Workshop. Some of you have probably done that if you're an ELA teacher. But how often are we taking those experiences outside of that ELA classroom and doing it in the content areas? So, now we're going to talk about wikis. Before I flip to the next slide, and this is kind of hard for me to see. I need sunglasses in here. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you are completely new to wikis? You have no clue what I am talking about at this point in time other than the regular reading and writing stuff? Okay. How many of you have used wikis? Okay. Excellent. So, for the benefit of the hands that did go up, essentially a wiki is a website that is easy to edit without having to know any type of coding or scripting or HTML markup language. It's what you see is what you get when you start to edit into the page. And Ward Cunningham, who is the father of wikis, described a wiki as the simplest thing that could possibly work, and it is. And wikis actually originated in IT departments in the business world. They've been around since about 1995-ish. So it's kind of an old tool. We lump it in with Web 2.0, and we don't even really use that word anymore, but we kind of lump it in with all of those other tools like blogs and things like that. But in reality, it's been around a long time, and it eventually spread out of those IT departments when other departments in those organizations noticed that it was really helping the collaborative teamwork in the IT departments. So it spread. And it's spread into education, fortunately. And how and where can we use it in the classroom? I used to just show this as a list of ways. But it bothered me because it included things that were completely different. So on one side you see teacher-centered uses. And on the other side you see learner-centered uses. And that's really important to distinguish between the kinds of ways you're using wikis. You can use them for both. But sometimes I see people say, I use a wiki in my class. It's my class website, and I put all of my instruction, all of my lessons up there, and instructions for the students, and things like that. But the students, other than opening the wiki and looking at it, they don't do any editing of the wiki. And if we want students to develop reading and writing skills across the curriculum, they need to be doing that reading and writing and editing. So I put heavy emphasis over on the other side, the learner-centered side. Then that's not to say that the teacher-centered side isn't, don't do that. Yeah, do that. Sure, that's great. Use a wiki because it's easy to use, right? So it's easy to create a class website very quickly and have it up and running, ready to go. And then you can have a part of it where you have students collaborating on it. So ways that students can use. I don't think I need to really describe the teacher uses very well. I mean, very much, do I? You know what that is. Students, collaborative note-taking, exploratory projects, again, the inquiry process. So this is good for any subject area, but especially science. So you have students doing inquiry in science. They can document their work in real time on the wiki page. And then it can turn into a way to display that work. You can also do exploratory or inquiry process assignments in social studies and in ELA and in math, and do that on there. Learn shares. Students working in pairs to learn and then share with classmates and then receive feedback, and the feedback can be done on the wiki. Individual self-assessments and e-folios. Excellent use of a wiki is for a student to create their own wiki site or just their own wiki page to house all of their work. You can do that in any classroom, again, across the curriculum. And then this last one that I have on here is really important, I think. At least from my perspective. I'm not in the classroom right now, but if I were, this is what I would be doing. I would be using a wiki for my students to create our own class Wikipedia, class textbook, and OER repository for our subject area. How many of you are familiar with OER? Open educational resources. You know what I'm talking about? Just a couple of hands went up. So what I'm talking about is content that's available online for free. And I probably don't have links directly to this in the handout, but I will, or in the wiki, but I will add it. Especially if someone will tweet to me to add it, S. Sandifer on Twitter. Say, remember to add the information about the OER. It's free and available for you to use and remix and repurpose. And there is OER for nearly every subject area. Actually, I think there's OER for every subject area. Again, that school project that I've been working on is going to rely heavily on OER. So I've been doing a lot of research around OER, and what I've found is there are gaps in OER. And so that was a problem for us, because as we were designing the school, one of the problems that we had was, okay, so what are we going to do with these gaps? If we've got gaps in the OER, and we want to use OER, and we're not going to purchase some curriculum, what are we going to do when we hit those gaps? And one of the suggestions I had was, well, why don't we have students create the OER for those gaps? And then the school could create its own repository of OER and publish it out on the internet for free. Now, of course, I'm not talking about students creating stuff and then putting it out there and no one's monitoring what's going on, but students can create their own OER. And part of the teacher assessment process can be that process of helping the student edit it and refine it so that it is ready for public consumption and ready for other educators to use in their classrooms with their students. And it can be in the form of a class textbook. It could just be in the form of snippets and pieces of the curriculum. But I think that's a really exciting and engaging way to use a wiki. It's just so easy to use that it's the ideal platform for that. So I'm going to get out of this. Well, let me go through these two real quick. So I think of all the 11 elements with a wiki, the two strongest are inquiry activities and collaborative writing, right? So let me hop out of this for a second. And I want to go to, okay, now this is going to be fun to see if I have, okay, I do see bars on my Wi-Fi, so let's see what we can do here. So here are some examples of classroom wikis used by teachers, created by teachers, used by teachers and their students. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. This is, I think this is an elementary class. So this is an example of a teacher-centered use. This is a class website. It's not, you don't have students editing this website, but the teacher is posting all of the information that they would normally give. They've gone paperless. That's pretty cool. That's good in itself. So that's a teacher-centered use. Miss Atwood's class, and this actually, there are some student-created pieces over here. So I'm just showing you the front page here, and this is hard for me to read. I'm looking at the monitor down there. Actually, not sure. No, those are teachers. Sorry. I thought there were some student ones on there. This one I like. This is a grade 2 wiki. So when we talk about reading and writing with wikis, and you think, okay, I get that for upper elementary and middle and high school, but what about lower elementary? These are, where are the student profiles? This does have student-created content on it. And some of it's done in the form of little animations that they've created. His writing page, taking pictures of some of the writing they're doing and posting it. So the kids are creating their own e-folios on here. But, you know, for people who are saying, can I do this with little kids? Yes, you can. It is, wikis traditionally tend to be text-heavy, but they don't have to be. You can, again, you can embed pictures and videos, things like that. This is a social studies middle school wiki. And if I remember correctly, when I saw this listed, there's a long list of them. I think I have it linked in the wiki. This one, they actually said they are looking for collaborators, for global collaborators. So let's see. He's got how-to pages. So here are the students. And let's see if we've got content on here. So some student work here, some student writing. And I'm going to show you, I will get to an example that has a lot more writing on it, so don't worry about that. It's just when some of these, they're focusing more on students posting. Now this is collaborative right here. So you see block A, block C, and then they've got topics listed under here. And, oh, that is just terrible. So hard to read. Let's see if this is the one. Okay, so there's some content there. And you notice these all look a little different. Everyone creates these however they want. This is a school-wide wiki. Again, some students listed, all about me. This is a lower grades. This is the film club, and this actually is a little old. When I looked at this, I thought, this is so cool. Then I realized it's a little out of date, and some of the videos aren't up. But what the students were doing is using it to showcase their videos or their films that they created. They've got descriptions of it up here, and they created trailers, and then they even had it open so that people could go in and comment on their videos after they had watched them, or on their trailers after they had watched them. And then probably the best example of a global collaboration that I can think of is Flat Classroom. Anybody familiar with Flat Classroom? A few people. Okay, so Vicki Davis and Julie Lindsay started years ago. They connected their classrooms. They met online through the blogosphere, and they connected their classrooms around the world. Vicki is in Georgia, I think. Can't remember. Yeah, Georgia. And then somebody help me out. Julie is in, or was in, the other side of the world. I should know that because I know them both. But anyway, so they started this just with their classrooms, and it has grown to where every year they recruit teachers and classes from around the world, and people get matched up. The students do long projects, and the students can do, they collaborate on in-depth inquiry projects where part of their team is in the class on the other side of the world. So they are practicing what a lot of people are doing in the business world now, where you have teams scattered all over the globe. You might be here in Texas, but you have teammates who are in India and Japan and, who knows, maybe the UK, and you have to collaborate with them. You have to create content and produce work, even though you're not sitting down face to face. Well, that's what these kids were experiencing, and it's just amazing. They have this book, this wonderful book, Flattening Classrooms, Engaging Minds. I can't recommend that enough. I got a copy of it, and I was just floored with the amount of, and I don't know when they had time to write this, because both of them still teach. But it's just this amazing book. And if you're interested in doing anything like this, this is your guidebook. So if you want to be able to get your kids connected globally, that right there is the resource to use. So let me get back into the slideshow very quickly, and then we're gonna go back to some wikis. So I mentioned the book. There's a bit.ly to take you directly to get more information about the book, Flat Classroom. So it's bit.ly/Flat Classroom. It's just RM. So there's no S. I mean, no O's. Sorry, excuse me. And again, that's on the wiki. It's all on the wiki. So those of us that have used wikis with students, what are some of the lessons we have learned in the process? The first one is probably a duh. That makes sense. That's definitely what you would want to do. Get organized. Using a wiki or any other technology tool or online tool in the classroom requires the same amount of care and attention to classroom management as any other activity. You're not going to just put a wiki up one day and throw it out there to the students and say, go forth, write, collaborate. If you noticed, one of those examples, or a couple of those examples, had links to information pages like how-tos, what are the instructions for use, the instructions for this activity. You're going to put all of that on the wiki. You're going to have a place for students to learn what it is they are expected to do and how to do it. You'll also probably have to do some tutorials with the students to help them understand some of the The wikis are really easy and simple to use. But they do require a little hand-holding at first if no one's used anything like that before. So that leads me to the second point, barn raising. This is a process where you have them do something all at the same time together with you. So when I've done wikis with faculty members or with the literacy coaches, when I was coaching the literacy coaches and trying to get them to understand how to use wikis, I did a barn raising. And what that means is I did an activity where I asked all of them to create their own profile page, and they did it right then and there. So kind of was like a workshop, right? They came in, I showed them what the wiki was, I showed them how to create a new page, just like I showed you at the beginning of the session, but I took a little bit more time with them, or smaller environment, smaller group. Showed them how to just click on that start a new page. They got a fresh blank new page, and then I just said, okay, now start writing. And here are some of the questions you should address in your profile. Or in other words, here's the structure. So tell us who you are, what school you work at, what grade levels you work with, how many years you've been in education. Really basic profile information, bio information. One important thing to know about wikis, how many of you use Google Docs? You've played around with Google Docs. All right, you can do Google Docs live at the same time, right? You can be writing and somebody else can be writing at the same time. It doesn't mess it up. You can't do that with wikis. So when you do a barn raising, don't have everybody edit on the exact same page at the exact same time. Because the one thing that I don't like about wikis is you can't edit at the same time. What happens is he or she who saves last wins. In other words, if I'm working on the wiki and you're working on the wiki and I save my edits and close it out, and then you go save your edits are going to overwrite mine, and mine will just completely disappear. That doesn't happen with Google Docs. And I actually use both. I use wikis and Google Docs, and depending on, going back to that, not what, but how and why, if I need simultaneous or synchronous editing, then I'll use a Google Doc. If it needs to go on a wiki, I can copy and paste it later. If it can be asynchronous, so if I'm working with a team that's dispersed, spread out, and we're working in different time zones, then I'll use a wiki. Or if even a face-to-face team, if we don't have to edit at the exact same time, we'll use the wiki. So when you do the barn raising, do an activity like that, where they create their own profile page. So if you're doing it with your students, it might be that they create the base page for their eFolio. And that's all you have them do. But you have them editing with you live right at that second, so you can troubleshoot and help them and do something simple. Start with something simple. So that's a barn raising. You're all doing it together. When you're working with students, have them use real names or nicknames. Now, I'm going to talk about my two preferred wiki sites in just a minute, and I'll explain this, because you're probably thinking, wait, how do you do the real names or nicknames? I'll get into the how in just a second, and I'll show you those two tools. But the purpose of that is you don't want anonymous testing. You don't want anonymous writing and editing. One of the great things, and usually when I do this in a workshop fashion and I can show this to teachers and we can do it together and they can see what happens, one of the great things about wikis is it saves all of the edits, all of the revisions. So every time you edit a page, it saves it. So you can go to revisions, and I'll show you where that is for those of you that are new to wikis. And the winning point, every time I've done this with teachers, the thing that wins people over and gets them to want to try this in their classroom is when I tell them, anyone who uses the wiki can be tracked. So you as the teacher can really know who's doing what on the wiki. And that's why you use real names or nicknames. So if you're going to make it public, like some of those examples I showed you, they put it up public. Notice they didn't have any last names. They just had first names, or they had first name, last initial. And Vicki and I are friends, and Vicki's even said you can do nicknames too, so you can make up names. So if, just make sure you as a teacher know which student wanted to be Darth Vader, which student wanted to be C-3PO, that kind of information, right? But you want to have some identifier so that you don't have students going in and anonymously doing things on the wiki. And again, if you've got them doing collaborative group projects, here's that other part of that winning piece. What's the worst thing about doing group projects in any classroom historically? Did you do group projects when you were in school? What did you like or not like about it? What did you not like about it? Listen. Right. With a wiki, it's really easy to see who participated and who didn't participate. So if I am grading students on their participation on the project, it's much easier for me to do that now because it's right there. It's all in the document. So then the last thing I've got down there, driver's ed modeling. Okay, so here's where I'm going to talk about, very quickly, just talk about my book. I don't think teachers should use tools in the classroom if they are not fluent, proficient, expert users themselves. And the great thing about wikis is they are awesome for doing a lot of teacher work. So doing collaborative lesson planning, doing action plans, site-based improvement plans, things like that. There's a ton of examples in my book. But the point is that start using wikis in your own work and for your own learning. In fact, if you're here with a team, you could set up a wiki today with your team, and all of you could start taking all of your notes for all of your sessions on that wiki. You could send the link back home today to your colleagues back home who didn't get to come, and they can see the notes from the sessions that you're attending. So it's a way to collaboratively share your professional learning. It's a great way to do that. I call it tag teaming a conference. And the point of that is, if you take driver's ed, or let me just put it this way, do we ever let anyone learn how to drive by putting them in the car with someone who's never driven a car before? Do we let them learn how to drive a car by just reading a book about it? And never having someone with hands-on experience being able to show them how to operate that car effectively, efficiently, and safely? We don't. And earlier when I showed the slide of the teacher-centered versus the student-centered uses of a wiki, sometimes when I see teachers who start to use a wiki but haven't really used it a whole lot, they tend to use it on the teacher-centered side because they haven't used it for their own learning yet and for their own collaborative content creation yet, so they don't understand how it can work in the classroom with the students. So learn how to do it yourself first with your colleagues and then start using it in the classroom. Okay, so let's go. My two favorite sites. I like all the wiki editing. Okay, so other than Google sites, excuse me, let me give you some terminology here. Wikispaces, PB Wiki, and WetPaint. Although WetPaint has changed now, so it's not like it used to be. Those were referred to as wiki farms. That's kind of the terminology that's been used for years for those organizations. You call it wiki host. But Wikispaces and Google Sites have become my two preferred platforms for a couple of different reasons. Google Sites is great because if your school has Google Apps, then your students already have accounts, so it's easy to use. If you don't have Google Apps, then the great thing about Wikispaces is you can set up, and that link will take you directly to the site to set up a teacher Wikispaces classroom account. You can set up, or you can load students in without having an account. All right, so it helps you. Wikispaces is wonderful in working with the education community. In fact, they just recently changed their logo. If you've used Wikispaces before, they used to have the little tree, which the idea of a wiki being a tree. But they just changed it now to, those are pencil points. And they refer to it as the 4 points of collaborative writing. And they specifically mentioned this in their blog post when they changed the logo. They said, we changed the logo because we work so closely with the education community and we want to, our company logo now will express our support for the collaborative writing that happens with, through the work that teachers and students do on wikis. Even though they still sell their wiki service to companies, they focus on education. So those are my two. And get out of this real quick. Let's go to Google Chrome. Okay, so let's talk about Wikispaces first. Introducing Wikispaces Classroom. Now, you can still get a regular Wikispaces wiki, which looks like a traditional wiki, or you can sign up for Wikispaces Classroom, which introduces these new features of a news feed, a way to do a new way to do assessment of student writing on there, and then setting up projects. Now they've had the projects feature for a while, but now they're kind of putting it all under the umbrella of Classroom, Wikispaces Classroom. And I've played around with Classroom a little bit, and I love it. It doesn't work very well for me in terms of how I use a wiki for professional learning with teachers. So I still use a regular wiki site for that. But if you use this in the classroom, so if I were using this with students, I would definitely use it as the classroom version. And when you sign up, it'll give you those options. You can set it up as a classroom or as a regular wiki. And it's all free. They are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And you'll notice that my handouts for this session, this is on Wiki Spaces. See the little 4 points of collaborative writing logo up there? To me, it's just a very straightforward platform. And if I want to edit a page, it just gives me this really simple little toolbar up here. I can scroll down, find the place where I want to make edits and start typing. And we don't have the time, unfortunately, for me to go in and show you how to do all of the really cool embedding and things like that, but you can embed videos, slideshows. You can embed Google Docs, which I do. This is actually the slideshow. You're looking at it through, when I was showing slides, I was showing it directly from Keynote on my laptop. But right here, I uploaded it to Google Presentations and then embedded it in here so you can actually flip through it like this. Right. Oh, excuse me. And then you can embed images, and embed hyperlinks. It's very, very cool. You can embed Google Forms, so you can have students respond to a form right there in the wiki. They don't leave the page. And Google Sites is a little bit different. And so that school I mentioned to you a little earlier, we are in the process of setting up an intranet for the staff for that school. And so you can see here how it looks a little bit like Wiki Spaces, same concept that you can go in and edit. In fact, I think I'm signed in, so I can click on Edit This Page, and it gives me the very familiar Google editing toolbar up here at the top. So I can go in and edit information. If I upload documents, they show up under here as just a document list. Very cool. I do like the look of Wiki Spaces, of Google Sites. Wiki Spaces has a lot of different templates that you can use to get a different look depending on what you want. Google Sites has even more templates. So you're going to have a different look depending on which one you choose to go with. Love them both very much. Let me go back to slideshow again very quickly. Okay, so before I close, in the research that has been done around what happens when people use wikis, because there actually, I didn't include this in here, but there's actually been research done in the workplace on worker productivity and the use of wikis. And it's fascinating because actually what they found is teams and departments that use wikis spend less time in meetings and they spend less time dealing with email because they do everything through the wiki. So a lot of the collaboration that they do is done through the wiki rather than sitting in a meeting, and they can cut down on all of the documents that get emailed back and forth. One of my pet peeves has always been working on a document with people, and I send it out to 5 people, and then I get 5 copies of it back where they've all done their editing, and then I have to sit down and spend a lot of time going through each of their edits and adding them into the main document. Now you can do all of that on a wiki. So in some of this research, what they've found is this professional and academic skills that are developed, that students and professionals can learn how to work synchronously and asynchronously together. It promotes negotiation because people have to negotiate that process of editing. Anybody ever look at the discussion page, the discussion tab on Wikipedia? So anyone ever clicked on that and looked at that? It's really interesting to see the dialogue that occurs between the collaborators before the finished document, or it's never really finished, but before the content is closer to being finished. Open editing, in other words, in that same line of thinking, that the writing is subject to your peers' editing and review. Feedback, you can get feedback quickly and easily. It also requires a lot of trust and helps students develop trust in their coworkers, their colleagues, their classmates, and in the process of doing this open collaborative type of writing. It also helps with knowledge building. It's mostly text-based, maximizes that interplay between all of those stages of reflecting what you want to write, reviewing it, publishing it, and then observing what happens. once it's published and out there and edited. And again, it's very democratic and promotes distributed authorship. So I'll take questions now, but I want to start with a question that I always get asked in any session that I do. And that question is always, this is great, but I only have 5 computers or 3 devices or 1 device, or I don't have anything in my classroom. How can I do cool stuff like this when I don't have the devices? The school doesn't have the money to buy them for me. And I've been asked that question in nearly every session that I do. So eventually I got to the point where I realized I needed a whole session on it. So that link right there takes you directly to all of my handouts and a slideshow that I do an entire session on this. How do you do connected learning, 21st century learning, in a classroom where you don't have a whole lot of technology? And I've got and in that there's ideas and links to resources that will give you more ideas. So any other questions? And if you don't have any questions, then I'd like to get some of your, I'd like to hear from you, some of your takeaways, ideas that you have for going forward. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do in August when you go back to school? And you can tweet those out. You don't have to say them out loud in here, but you can tweet it out using the hashtag. But if you want to speak up in here, that's fine too. So any takeaways or questions? And if you're under the lights, you may have to speak up rather than waiting for me to rate or point to you, because you really can't see anybody under there. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 So I don't know if you could hear his comment, but he was saying that, and you teach an ELA for second language learners, is that right? At the high school level, and you frequently hear that I'm not the reading teacher, I'm not the writing teacher, and his point is that students have to have content. It has to come from somewhere. If we're having them just write without having a how did you describe that? Without a foundation of some other content first, then it becomes junk writing. He held up a bottle, 0 calories, or it's like junk food, junk soft drinks and things like that. So good point, very good point. And that was kind of what I was touching on earlier when I said something about fake content or fake writing or fake examples. Yeah, if we've got them reading and writing about real things, and those real things are in those science and the social studies and the math and some in the ELA, but you want them to have a broad exposure to all of that and the reading and writing that occurs in all of that. Any other comments or questions? And we're close. We've got a few more minutes. If not, one more thing. I do have down here on the stage, I've got some pins, some cards for the Connected Educator, information about Connected Educator Month. If you're not familiar with that, it's a great event. That the first one was last August. They've moved it to October based on feedback because a lot of people were not back in school or they were just getting back in school, and so August was not a good time. And then I've got some of my cards if you want my contact information. And then I said I was going to give away some stuff, right? Isn't that what I said? So I will come back to this slide in a second. I guess I could stay on the slide. Do we have anything in the wiki? If not, then I'll figure out another way to... Oh, we do. Okay. Let me look at this down here. 4, 5, 6, 8. Okay. Let me do it this way. Okay, I'm just going to quickly scroll through here. Gail, Emily, Kate, CK. Who is that? It's like Gail, Emily, Kate, CK, C. Lise, Mike, Philip, and Susan. Did I call your name? If I called your name, come on up. You got something. And actually, I think I have enough for everybody that got something. Okay, so I've got 3 copies of my book. And then I've got one size of each. They didn't give me a whole lot. Extra large, large, medium, small. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out. I will tweet out a link to this. I forgot to make a slide for it, for the session. What do you call it? The session survey, whatever they call it, feedback survey that ISTE does. I'll send the link out via Twitter. Looks like you got the small. Sorry. Okay. Thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.